Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We're so glad to have you and that you're able to join us today. It's beautiful where I am, which is in the southeast region of the state down by Cape Girardeau. I'm Donna Oftenberg. We have lots of great information for you today, as always. So definitely keep sending in those questions and those pictures for us to help you with. We may have enough time today to answer a few questions at the end of the garden hour. So just stay tuned. We'll let you know if we have enough time. Let me get the state map turned. My computer's not behaving. Let me get the map started. Okay, there we go. Just take a look at the map, find your location and look and see who the closest specialist is in your area. That is the person that you would be contacting if you have any questions. If there's a vacancy in that area, just go to the next person closest to you. We try not to draw too many county or regional lines. So if you see somebody on here that you've called before or that you really like the sound of their name or you think they're very knowledgeable, just reach out to them. We don't mind, and we'll try to help you the best that we can. So joining us today, we have Jennifer Shooter from the Northeast region. We have Katie Kamler from the St. Genevieve area, Kathy Meacham in the Northwest region. We have Kelly McGowan from the Springfield area, Tamara Rial from Kansas City, Jared Fogue, who's our the person that helps us on all the technical stuff. Juan Cabrera, who is our one of our state specialists, and Pat Ganan, who is our weather reporter. Kathy has changed her name to ask your questions here. So if anytime during this session you have questions, you can send them to her in the chat. Make sure you include your email address. So if we do run out of time, we will be able to get in touch with you and answer your question in a timely manner. We are going to start with the weather report. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat Ganan.
Sounds good. Thank you, Donna. And indeed, I think today is the pick day of the week for nice weather here in Missouri. We're almost through the month of April, so I thought it'd be nice to perhaps look and see what we've been experiencing temperature-wise. And on the left, an interesting scenario occurring across the United States. Any of those greens and blues are below normal temperatures from April 1st through the 26th. And then in these along the southern US, these orange colors are above normal temperatures. So we have a pretty big temperature gradient, who's been cool this month and who's been warm. You can see Missouri fits into that cool category. The numbers are indicating anywhere from about 2 to perhaps 4 degrees below average for most locations in the state. And so it will go down in the record books as a below average month. 3 out of the past 4 months have so far been cool: January, February, and April. And so what's interesting to note, when I like to show this picture, because if you think we've been windy this month, on the right backs up that supposition. We are being above average in the wind conditions. You know, that's partially due to this big temperature gradient that we see across the US. We've had a jet stream bisecting the middle part of the country, generally running from northwest to southeast. And so we've had a lot of storm systems, fairly strong storm systems, tap into that temperature differential and bring the winds with it, because it's the pressure gradient that causes the winds. And we've seen a lot of active systems traverse the country so far this month. So you can see on the right for 2022 up through yesterday, I used Columbia as a midpoint, looking at their wind records for the month of April, going all the way back to 1997. So that's 26 years of April wind data. And we've averaged about 11.6 miles per hour through April 26th. So it's the windiest April since 2018, and it ranks so far as the 4th windiest in the past 26 years. So indeed, it has been a windy and cool month here in Missouri. Precipitation over the past week, we did have some systems move through, bring some rainfall across much of the state. Heaviest precipitation where they don't need it across southern Missouri, very wet conditions. I would say the southeastern half of the state, we're wet. We could actually hopefully have some drying opportunities, but I really don't actually see that over the next several days, with rain chances back in the picture starting tonight and through the first half of the weekend. Nonetheless, these are the numbers. Lighter precipitation totals across northwestern, west central parts of the state. Overall, however, most areas picked up anywhere from a half to over 2 inches of rain over the past 7 days. If you think it's been wet or dry this month, it's sort of interesting to note. It's been wet, especially across southern, southeastern parts of the state. But the northwestern half of the state actually is running a little bit below average. We still have fairly wet conditions in the soil profile because it's been so cool. That's lessened the evaporation or evaporative demand. And so we haven't seen as much moisture evaporated because of the cool conditions so far in April. And it does look like we're going to be catching up with perhaps to going above normal over the next few days for a larger part of Missouri, with some notable chances of rain for the next few days. We had another cold morning yesterday. Frost reported across much of the state, especially I'd say the northern half of Missouri, perhaps some frost in some of the low-lying areas of the Ozarks. But these are some of the low temperatures used in Missouri mesonet stations. You can see much of northern Missouri. There were in northwestern parts of the state in the middle to upper 20s. On the right here are some cooperative weather stations from the National Weather Service. Some of the lowest temperatures, look at in Worth County, Sullivan County, down into low to mid 20s. So some very cold conditions yesterday morning. And we actually, the week before on last Tuesday, we had some freezing weather. But low temperatures for this time of year. Fortunately, we're not going to see any freezing conditions, at least not in the forecast for the next several days. And so that'll get us into May with no more freezing weather, at least forecast over the next week or so. Soil temperatures have rebounded nicely since last week. Generally over the past week, average soil temperatures at the 2-inch depth under bare soil are generally running in the low to mid 50s, even the upper 50s, low 60s across the southern half of the state. In the middle here, the blue line is the average 22-year average for Columbia, the 2-inch bare soil temperature. The red line is what we've been experiencing over the past 10 days or so. And you can see up and down nature of it. That's kind of the weather pattern we've seen for much of the year so far. We had those warmer conditions this past weekend with highs in the 80s, but they've cooled down over the past few days. And so the soil temperatures are reacting to that, but more seasonable in that regard. Here on the far right, you can see as of about 15 minutes ago, the soil temperatures are running pretty well into the low to mid 60s. A little bit cooler here up in Knox County, but these could actually be some grass clippings or weeds growing in some of the soil plots. We're going to need to get those cleared out. Overall, the state looks like those soil temperatures are running well into the 60s as of late this morning. Well, the pick day of the week will be today with the sunshine, the low humidity, and light winds. Things are changing. We have a system that will be moving into western Missouri tonight, bringing those first chances of rainfall, perhaps even some claps of thunder as we go into late tonight. That will be occurring in western Missouri overnight and then translating eastward across much of the rest of the state as we go through the day on Thursday, Friday, and even into Saturday morning. I do want to note that there could be a severe weather outbreak potential here in the Central Plains, and that's impacting eastern Kansas, western Missouri. So something to keep an eye on for Friday night. They are indicating perhaps some strong thunderstorms developing late Friday afternoon in Kansas. Those could congeal into a squall line, and move eastward into the state Friday evening, Friday night. And the highest likelihood of perhaps seeing some severe weather will be across western Missouri on Friday night. You can see the high and low temperatures over the next few days. That'll take us through the weekend. Very seasonable conditions. Again, no freezing weather on the horizon for the next several days. Lows only dropping into the 50s with the cloud cover that will keep those minimum temperatures elevated. And you can see generally in the 50s as that cold front moves through the state on Sunday. We will see a little bit of cooler temperatures on Sunday morning with lows in the 40s across western and the northern parts of the state. High temperatures do look fairly nice, somewhat seasonable, maybe a little bit below average, but not too much. You can see here the max temperature for tomorrow in the lower left. That cooler area you see across about the northeast quarter of the state, that's indicative perhaps of where those showers will be falling for most of the day, keeping those temperatures suppressed as we go through tomorrow with the rainy activity. On Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it does look like a little bit of moderation, but highs in the 70s, a little bit cooler across northern Missouri on Sunday with highs in the middle 60s. This is the forecast of precipitation over the next 5 days. Again, Missouri is a bullseye for some notable precipitation, at least over the next few days. I would say most of this is forecast to fall between tonight and Saturday morning, anywhere from 1 to 1.5 inches, even a contour of 2 inches here in South Central Missouri. Another bullseye of heavy precip across the northern plains impacting North and South Dakota. So it does look like some significant rainfall over the next few days impacting the Show Me State. And for next week, this is the forecast of Monday through Friday. It does look like perhaps, again, that's sort of that situation we've seen in April with cool across the north, warm across the south. Missouri's right in the middle, sort of that battle zone of cold versus warm. And so that's going to bring some unsettled weather. Again, it looks like we're going to see more chances of showers and thunderstorms, perhaps as early as Monday and then continuing into the middle part of next week. On the right, you can see a high likelihood there. The darker the shade of green, the higher the confidence that this forecast will verify, at least according to the forecasters. And so most of Missouri, they're indicating a fairly high likelihood of above normal precipitation next week. I will say May is climatologically our wettest month. And so that averages out to about 1.25 inches every week for the month of May. And so they're forecasting above average precipitation, which would be above that 1.25 inches every week. So it looks like these very wet conditions, at least we're going to see over the next few days, and then another system perhaps impacting our state early next week and bringing more rainfall into the early and middle part of next week. Donna, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Hey. Thank you, Pat. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer as your moderator.
Thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here in Kirksville, Missouri, up in the northeast part of the state, where it has been cool and rainy. And we are several weeks behind the southern part of the state. But let's go ahead and get started with our topics today. This time of the year, we do get lots of rain, and often we see a green, gooey slime, and people are wanting to know, what is this? And I'm going to turn it right back over to Donna to answer this question for us.
So I was introduced to it with Gnostic algae probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I all of a sudden seen it growing in my driveway, in my grass, and in several different places on the property. And I was just appalled at this slimy, awful looking mess. And so I decided maybe it might be a good topic to talk about it. So some people call it witch's butter because it is that gooey green mess. It's not a true algae, even though it is called Gnostic algae. It's what we define as a cyanobacteria. So it's a type of bacteria. And I know I get lots of calls into the office, as well as other specialists do too, about how to control it. Well, it is hard to control, and mainly because it is not a true plant. It's not an algae. It is a bacteria. It thrives in cool, wet conditions. But what I've noticed on my property is you can find it throughout the year. Usually gets green and nasty when it's wet out, and then it dries up to a dark green to black crusty material when it's dry. But it always stays there. It never goes anywhere other than if people track it. It can be tracked by your feet, by lawnmowers, by gardening equipment. So just keep that in mind. It also is really commonly found in wet areas, compacted soils, thin grassy areas, graveled areas, and sidewalks. And if it does get on sidewalks and graveled areas, it can become very slick, especially when it's wet. So be careful. Non-chemical control, if you do have it, when it's wet, you can use a flat edge shovel and try to skim it off the area. And the big thing is just don't throw it to the side. You need to dispose of it. That means getting rid of it, throw it in the trash, send it in the garbage, get rid of it. Don't leave it laying around. When it dries, you can also use a rake to flake it off and then scoop it up and get rid of it. Once again, dispose of it. I know there are chemicals out there, they say, that controls this, but they are not very effective. And so if you go and look at the local box stores or retailers and it says controls algae, You might do a little bit of research and find out what's in that product and find out if it truly works. Odds are it won't. The big thing you can do is cultural controls, which means that's the things that we do in our yards. So improve the drainage in that area, fill in any low spots that might be helping it survive. You want to aerate compacted soils. You can rent that equipment to aerate it. Avoid phosphorus applications. What they have found on research is that the phosphorus really fires this up and makes it even worse. So if you're fertilizing lawns or fertilizing gardens and you have this in your areas, do a soil test, make sure you're okay on phosphorus. If you're okay on phosphorus in the soil, don't be applying the extra phosphorus because it can make it worse. And then don't overwater. And then watch, if you have an irrigation system, shut it down after rains. Don't be running it. That way you can limit the water that's sitting around. Once again, controls, and I've already mentioned this earlier, keep the lawns healthy and thick, reseed in those thin areas in a timely manner. Don't track it. If you see it, try to get rid of it before you walk through it or you mow through it. I know I have a dog. She's all over the place. I noticed that she could even be tracking a lot of it. Just be careful with it. Over-the-counter chemical control is hard to achieve. Just remember what I talked about. Do your research. Potassium salts or copper sulfate is what's usually in these products. They're not always effective. They may knock it back, but it might be enough for you to get in there and scoop it out. There is a product also called Scythe that they say gives moderate control, but to me, you're just better off getting in there and scooping it out and getting it gone instead of trying to fight it and fight it and fight it. And just keep in mind, no general herbicides are going to give any control. I did look online and there's a lot of home remedies. One home remedy is bleach, but just be aware that it's not always good to add bleach to the soil. I don't really recommend it. And that was brought up from a caller I had a couple of weeks ago. They were treating theirs with bleach. You're better off just scooping it up and getting rid of it. Okay, Jennifer, that's all I have on that topic.
All right, thank you. We had a question come in regarding whether it's too late to plant cool season vegetable crops. And the question is, my garden is so wet that I feel certain my time for planting cool weather crops will be over before I can work the ground. However, I will still have cool weather crop transplants. Is it possible for me to plant these crops when the land or ground becomes workable? And when the warm weather arrives, can I use a shade cloth over the plants to keep them thriving? And Kelly is going to answer that question for us.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I don't have any photos to share or anything. I just thought I would talk a little bit about this question. So we are getting at the end of the time to plant cool season vegetables. Ideally, they would have been in the ground by now, but we still have a little window of time to plant those, especially here in Southwest Missouri. We've still had quite a bit of cool weather. So I don't think it's too late to go ahead and get those in the ground. So if I were you, if it were my plants, even if the ground is wet, I would probably still go ahead and plant those. Now, we typically advise not to work the soil if it's really wet. So I certainly wouldn't go out there with a garden tiller or anything that's going to plow up the soil. I would simply go out there and dig you a little hole and plant your plants like that. I think they'll be fine, especially once the soil starts to dry out a little bit. That is certainly an option. So go ahead and plant them now. Just don't till up the soil while it's wet. They can also be planted in containers. Cool season vegetables and other vegetables can easily be planted in containers. The larger, the better. So that is another option that you can do. And then as far as the part about the shade cloth, our cool season vegetables can withstand some direct sun, some warmer temperatures. They do tend to molt or go to seed as we get into warmer temperatures, but I think you'll be okay for a little while. And I probably wouldn't mess with putting a shade cloth over the plants. I think they'll be okay. So if it were me, I would just go ahead and plant them now. And Jennifer, that's all I have.
Thank you. It is now time for our weekly friend or foe with Tamara.
Fantastic. So let me get this up. And I am going to launch the poll so you can see what insect we have on here. Is this a friend or a foe? Hopefully you can see the poll at this point. Just put in your answer. I'll give you guys just a few more seconds. Okay, all right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm ending the poll. All right, and let me share the results. We're pretty one-sided on this. Everybody pretty much decided that this was a friend, and sure enough, this is a friend. So this could easily be confused with a carpenter bee, and but this is not. And let me just give you a little bit of a description. So down here on the bottom, this is where we're looking to see if it's a carpenter bee or if it's a bumblebee. And if it is shiny without the hairs, then that's going to be a carpenter bee. But this is definitely hairy. So this is a bumblebee, and it's a common bumblebee. So this is actually the Bombus impatiens. It's a native bumblebee, the common eastern bumblebee. And just a little more information about these so you understand the life cycle. These are, the new colonies are started with a young queen. She's called a gyne at that point. She'll leave her nest actually in the fall. She'll mate with a single drone, and then she'll excavate a small underground chamber where she hibernates through the winter. So this is different than our honeybees, which actually mate with multiple drones and can happen in the spring. This all happens in the fall. When she comes out in early spring, which started a few weeks ago, she's going to then forage for nectar and look for a suitable nesting site, which is often an abandoned underground burrow, sometimes left from a small mammal like a mouse or a vole. So if you happen to see a very large bumblebee, bigger than what you normally see in the season, there's a good chance that what you are seeing is a queen bumblebee. And so you're going to want to leave her alone because she is the start of a whole new generation. Now, one other interesting behavior about these, I want to show this. Hold on, let me go ahead and escape so that I can show you a video of a really neat behavior that these bees have. And that's where they will lift one of their legs. It looks like she's saying hi and she's greeting you and greeting spring, but really what she's doing is she's saying, stay back, do not get close to me. This is actually a warning sign. And bumblebees can sting. They are so not aggressive, but you probably don't want to pick it up. And not that I would know from personal experience or anything, but a bumblebee sting does hurt. It doesn't seem to hurt quite as much as a honeybee sting, but it seems to last longer. Again, not from personal experience or anything. Yes, okay. But anyway, just leave them alone. Let them do their thing. They're just fascinating to watch. But anyway, so I am going to drop some more information about our bumblebees, and that's what I have for today. Thanks.
Cameron, there's a question in the chat. What is the difference between a bumblebee and a yellow jacket?
Great question. Completely different species, different family. Bumblebees are native pollinators. They feed on nectar and pollen and are a social insect. Compared to yellow jackets, which are wasps, wasps do not nearly have as much hair, so they're going to look quite different. They're going to be much more narrow. They also are omnivores. They're carnivores. They do sometimes feed on some pollen, but they'll eat caterpillars and and spiders and things like that. So they're actually predators. They will hunt out different insects to eat or different arthropods. A lot of people think of yellow jackets as pests. They can hurt when they sting. I recommend not allowing them to have nests close to your house where you could end up being. But when they are out in nature, they actually can be beneficial. So very different insects, though they do have that yellow and black coloration that's similar.
Okay, great information. Thank you. We are now going to switch to houseplants. And right now, some people might have some questions about what am I supposed to be doing with my houseplants? And Kathy is going to talk about that.
Thank you, Jennifer. So yes, people start asking, can I go ahead and move my houseplants out? And no, what I say is be patient. I want my plants out, as bad as anybody else, but it's just a little too cold and the weather's just too unpredictable. You really want to wait until the night temperatures are between 55 and 60 or more, and that's about mid-May. So when you do move them out, you want to move them to a shaded area that's protected from wind and heavy rains. And just remember that too much sun too fast can cause leaf burn. So you would not want to move a plant, even if it's a sun-loving plant, out into the full sun when it first goes out. It probably at least a 2-week period to gradually get them into brighter light. At porches and covered decks and places like that are really good places for locations for plants, indoor plants, because they're still protected, but oftentimes they'll get enough light. And then some plants, the more sun-loving ones, like I said, could be moved to sunnier locations over a little bit of time. So as they adjust to that new location, the leaves, as you know, when they first go out, they could, the leaves could lighten and they might turn a yellow or a light green, and they could actually fold. But once they're adjusted, then that leaf should just return to normal. And once they are acclimated, you can fertilize, but just wait until, if they look like they're not doing so well, just wait until you start eating fertilization. And so anytime you move a plant, it could need a little period of acclimation. So sometimes I get mine out and that just doesn't seem quite the right place, and I move it to the front porch or something like that. And so anytime that I do that, I know that they might show a few symptoms. And also remember, whoops, I spelled remember wrong. Remember that plants may need more water when they're outside, but don't overwater. It's just, the number one killer, I believe, of indoor plants when your plants are indoors, and the same thing can happen outdoors. Don't over fertilize, don't overwater. But what could you do now? You could be looking for new growth. And if you do see signs of new growth, you can start fertilizing. I would do a weak solution. You can also start trimming up and any dead leaves, or shaping the plant a little if you want, trimming, but you don't want to do more than a third of the plant, cut off more than a third of the plant. You can also, on a pretty day, get your space outdoors ready. And then also you can, if they need repotting, this is the right time to repot. And you just don't want to go up in pot size too much. So 1 or 2 inches is about all you want to go up. So some plants, some of my more delicate plants, or what I might call my favorite plants, I don't move outside at all. I just keep them indoors and have 1 or 2, maybe 5 plants in the house all summer. And while I do love my plants, I really like them when they're outside. I just enjoy my space indoors without the plants. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Kathy. Some people have questions about planting or reseeding a lawn, planting lawn grass, and whether they should use a warm season grass or cool season grass. And Juan is going to talk to us now about planting cool season grasses.
Thank you, Jennifer. So when I was in the field, I would often get calls from homeowners saying like, hey, it's warming up outside and I think I'm gonna start putting out lawn seeds. And my strong suit is not on turf and lawns, but I remember from experience, I in the conversations that I had with Lee Miller when he was working for MU about this topic, and I learned a lot. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Sorry, I didn't have time to prepare a presentation, but when we're talking about lawns, we have two categories. We have what we call the cool season turf or lawns, and we also have the warm season turf and lawns. So what that means is that refers to the temperature at which those grass species thrive and they grow and they're happy. So if you think about it, when you're having a lawn for your house, you have to decide whether you want it to look beautiful during the cool season parts of the year, which is early spring, or late in the fall, or whether you want that grass to look healthy and green and thriving during the summer months. Also, it refers to when in the year you're going to be mowing more often, as opposed, let's say, for example, cool season grasses, you're going to be mowing them often during the cool season part of the year and not as much during the summer months. As opposed to a warm season grass, you're going to be mowing them a lot during the summer months. So it's a choice that you have to make. And people call me saying like, I want cool season grass or my cool season lawn is looking patchy. I'm gonna plant them right now, this time of the year. And let me tell you that it is not a good idea to plant them right now because think about you're putting that young seed in the ground. Yeah, it's gonna be cool enough for that young seedling to develop and grow, but then it's gonna be very young when the summer comes. And warm temperature comes. So it's not going to be a little plant that's going to be able to defend itself during the time of the year that they do not perform well, which is the summer months. So, and another thing to think about it is that Missouri is in the transition zone in terms of weather. So the spring weather may be unpredictable. So you may have some years that you have the cool spring temperature, but you may have some years where spring is really hot. So with that said, the best time to plant cool season grasses, seeds, it's in the fall, early fall, late summer, early fall, which is last week of August and first week of September, if you're gonna do seeds. Now you can go with sod for cool season grasses, but that's gonna be very expensive. So if you're thinking about planting cool season grasses or reestablishing your lawn, because you saw that it is patchy with cool season grasses, best time to do it is late summer, early fall.
Okay, thank you, Juan. I am now going to talk about weeds. We all get questions this time of the year. Actually, we get questions year round, it seems like, on weeds. Even in the winter, somebody might find a dead weed and bring it in here and want to know what it is. They do. They might find a dried brown weed behind the barn and they want to have that identified. So in December, they come in with their plant or their weed and we identify that stuff. So I want to talk about some of the weeds that you might be seeing right now in your garden or your lawn. And we're going to start with garlic mustard. This is a weed that you might find when you're hiking through the woods or you go to I've actually seen it at a state park here in Northeast Missouri on a hiking trail. I found some in the woods. This is a plant that is a biennial and it is in the mustard family. It will come up by seed. It will form a plant the first year, and then the second year it will send up a flower stalk and set seed. It is invasive, it is non-native, and it can take over a forest floor. It will crowd out native plants, including wildflowers. This plant was brought to the United States from Europe for the use as a culinary herb, and it does have a characteristic garlic odor. The plant is 2 to 4 feet tall, and it is covered with numerous small 4-petaled white flowers in May. So you will see this when you're, out and about. Maybe you're going into the woods for a hike. Maybe you're going to state park. You're going to probably see this. It's pretty common here in Missouri. Another plant that is in bloom right now and will continue to bloom for another few weeks is yellow rocket. This is in the mustard family. This plant is a winter annual or sometimes a biennial. So this plant can germinate in the fall when it turns cooler, and then just sit dormant in the winter, and then in the spring it will flower and go to seed. It can also come up by seed in early spring or late winter. And right now, people are starting to see this plant come up in their lawns or their gardens or along the roadside. And they're bringing this into the extension office, wanting it identified. So you will often find this in cultivated and fallow fields and pastures. You may find it on stream banks. You might find it along railroad tracks and in waste places. And you might also find it in your garden and possibly in your yard. So I have already found this plant in some disturbed areas at my house. And here at the extension office, we do have a few plants in the garden. It is native to Europe and Asia. It has been widely naturalized in North America. It was used medicinally as a tea to treat a number of ailments. And a variety of insects, including ants, bees, and butterflies, harvest nectar and pollen from the flowers. There are several butterfly and moth species that use the plants in the mustard family as food plants, laying their eggs on the leaves, which the emerging caterpillars eat. And here on this slide, you can see the flowers up close, as well as the rosette growth. And right now, you may have yellow rocket in different stages. I have seen some that are starting to bloom, and then I have seen many plants that are just in the rosette stage at this point. So again, this is yellow rocket in the mustard family. Moving on, this is shepherd's purse. This is very common in disturbed areas, in gardens, landscape beds, agricultural settings, and sometimes you might find it in your yard. It is a winter annual. It may come up in the fall when it gets cooler and then just sit dormant during the winter. And then in late winter, let's say February, March, it starts putting on growth. And by the time we get to mid to late spring, it has formed a flower and then seed pods. The seed pods, as you can see in the photos, are heart-shaped and contain seeds. Here we have wild violets. This is a common plant found in lawns or even flower beds or other types of garden beds. It is often found in moist areas, maybe shady areas, or areas that are poorly drained. Some people find these plants troublesome, but others welcome their pretty flowers in the spring. Flowers attract bees and other insects. They are an important early food source for bees. Violets are perennial, and given the opportunity, they will spread by seeds. So you can view this plant either as a pest that you don't want in your yard, or view it as an early food source for the bees. I know some people like this plant and don't mind having violets in the yard, and others want them gone. This is bedstraw. I have seen bedstraw already up and emerged and growing. Different sources I looked at listed as, some listed as an annual, some listed as a perennial. I'll tell you, Iowa State has it as an annual. Missouri's Weed ID website has it listed as a perennial. Bedstraw grows in landscape beds on top of turf that is not mowed, in fields, and along wooded areas. Bedstraw has short hairs on the stems, leaves, and fruits that are like tiny hooks, and they can catch on your shoes, your clothing, or even your skin. And bedstraw spreads by seed. And I would imagine a lot of you gardeners have encountered bed straw while working, in your gardens or working in beds, because it does stick to your pants or your clothing, and it gets caught in your shoestrings. So it can be kind of a pain to deal with. And here we have lamb's quarter. This one is a summer annual, and I put it in here because it is starting to come up. You're going to see it growing in your garden, maybe in your mulch pile, vacant lots, disturbed areas. And the reason I wanted to put it in here is because some of us eat this plant. This is an edible plant, and some of us use it like spinach. So you can harvest the leaves from it. It is best to harvest the leaves when they are young and tender. When the plant gets to mature, like you see on the right, it gets a little tough and is just not as good for eating. But when the plant is small, and that's going to be here in the next few weeks, so usually late April into May is when you want to pick the lamb's quarter leaves. And then you can eat them raw, or you can cook them like you would spinach, put a little butter on it, maybe a little seasoning on it. And I will tell you, I've been eating this for years, and my kids and husband even eat this plant, and we like it. And, my mother harvested it and cooked it when I was a kid, and my grandma and my great grandma. So we've had generations in my family harvesting lamb's quarter and cooking and eating lamb's quarter. And again, I like it and would encourage you to try it if you never have. Now let's talk about some integrated pest management strategies for control. You want to keep your lawn grass thick and healthy, and you want to have your flower beds mulched to prevent weed seeds from germinating. So make sure that your flower beds have about a anywhere from a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch to have, you want it thick enough so that the seed does not germinate. But also keep your lawn healthy. Often lawns that are scalped and, weedy, or maybe the soil pH is too low, they are a lot more likely to have weeds. You can dig or pull weeds in the winter or spring before they set flowers and seed for the next year. So right now I've been pulling out shepherd's purse as I find it in the garden. I've been pulling out yellow rocket. So, hand pull it or dig it out before it sets a flower. You also can prevent the spread of these weeds by, just being cautious. The weeds can be spread by, garden equipment, machines, your clothing, your pets. It gets stuck in the pet's fur. And then contaminated seed that you have purchased, if it has weed seed in it, you can spread these weeds. You can apply pre-emergent herbicides in late summer or early fall before the weed seeds germinate, and then again in February. So some of these winter annuals will germinate in the fall. Chickweed, henbit, which I did not put in here today because we've already talked about that, but those, along with some of these I've mentioned, they may start germinating in the fall, as well as, again, in late February and March. Right now, you can use chemical herbicides if necessary. You want to apply when the weeds are actively growing, but before they go to seed. And you can spot treat with, you can use Roundup, but be very cautious. Roundup will kill anything it touches. You could also use broadleaf herbicides. But again, if you are treating these weeds in a flower bed with flowers that are up and growing, you can kill your flowers. So just be very careful when using herbicides. So use caution around desirable plants, and always read the label directions and apply the chemicals very carefully. And with that, we will move on to the next topic. So viburnums are a very common shrub in Missouri, and there are a lot of different types of viburnums, and Donna is going to talk about that.
Okay, before I get started, there was a question that came in about Gnostic algae, and they wanted to know whether it was toxic or not. No, it's not toxic to anything. Although I don't know any animal or anyone who tries to eat it, but from what I have read, it's non-toxic. Okay, so on to viburnums. Viburnums happen to be probably one of my most favorite plants. And a lot of the reason is because of the wonderful spring bloom. As you can see, most of them are white. And we'll talk about some of the different varieties that I have grown. There are some native varieties, and there's also some introduced species from Asia. And there's about 150 species in all. And there are lots and lots and lots of different cultivars. I'm just always enamored in the fact that I think there's a viburnum for every type of situation. They can be deciduous, and there are some varieties that are semi-evergreen and some varieties that are evergreen. So definitely, if you're looking to put one in the landscape, do your research and find out which ones are which. Some like it shade, some like semi-shade, and some like sun. So like I said, there's a viburnum for every situation. There are viburnums that only grow up to 3 foot, and then there's ones that will grow 15 to 30 foot tall. So just once again, do your research. Most of them bloom. Some of them put on berries, some are sterile, and we'll cover some of that. And really what I like about viburnums is there's just not too many problems with them when it comes to pests. I know that there's a few of them that might get woodpecker damage on the stems. There might be some that there might be a caterpillar here and there eating, but for the most part, no serious problems, which I really like. Just to give a few examples of some of my favorite varieties, this is what we call a Korean spice viburnum. This is Viburnum carlesi, very popular with most gardeners, and because they are very fragrant, to the point where you can be 10 feet, 15 feet away from it and still smell it. It's just amazing. This one is deciduous, meaning it's going to lose its leaves, blooms April to May. The blooms are usually probably 2 to 3 inches in diameter. The cluster is. The plant only gets about 4 to 5 feet tall. And like I said, this one, you can't beat it when it comes to fragrance. It's very fragrant. Another one, this is a native that I really like. This is the arrowwood viburnum. I really like this one because you can actually make it into a hedge. Plant it very closer together. It works as a screen, fairly rapid grower. It will lose its leaves. Just keep that in mind. I really like the leaf, how it's jagged, and it just really gives a really different texture to the garden. It does bloom in May through June, so it's getting ready to bloom here in the southern part of the state. The flowers are not fragrant, however. They're just very beautiful. It's a cluster or umbel of flowers, usually 3 to 4 inches wide. And then what I also like about the arrowwood is the fact that it gives a really pretty color. It can be anywhere from a yellow to an orange. And I've seen some of them get a dark orange, and they also have berries, which the wildlife will eat. One that's real popular with gardeners also is the snowball viburnum. This is one that is commonly mistaken for a hydrangea, and mainly because it has that big mop head bloom. But in viburnums, we call it snowballs. Native to Asia, these snowballs can be anywhere from 3 to 8 inches in diameter. The plant is usually a nice shaped vase shape, and it gets about 8 to 10 feet tall. There are a couple of smaller varieties that you can get, or cultivars. Once again, blooms May through June. The flowers, once again, are not fragrant, and they are sterile. So which means that snowball bushes generally do not have the berries. Another popular one we see is leatherleaf viburnum. Here in Southeast Missouri, it is an evergreen. In northern areas, it is probably a semi-evergreen to a deciduous plant, just depending on how cold it gets. One thing I do not like about this one is the far left picture. It gets a little weepy looking in the winter, and I don't tend to like that as much. I've had one, and to me, the weeping makes it look a little sickly, but other people like it. They say it doesn't bother them. Does get a nice spring bloom on it. And it has some red berries that are very attractive later in the year, and also can feed the wildlife. So this ends up being a really nice one. Gardeners use this one for an evergreen in my area. One of my most favorite is a cranberry bush viburnum. This is actually a native. What I like is the leaves are different. They look like a maple leaf, or they have that palmate leaf design. They are very fragrant, a lot like Carliside. You can smell them for many feet away. The blooms are bigger. They have, sterile as well as fertile flowers in the, what I call lace cap. The bush does get fairly large. It's 12 to 15 feet tall, but it is an amazing shrub. Birds really like nesting in it. They really like eating the berries. One thing I hear a lot of gardeners talk about and having cranberry bush viburnums is they actually use the berries to make jelly. It's a very tart berry, so you would have to add sugar, but there are recipes out there for making cranberry jelly. And one of the other ones that I have that I grow in my yard that is fascinating is one called the double file viburnum. Once again, native to Asia. What makes this one different than a lot of the other viburnums is the blooms, the way they're set on the branches. They are in a tiered horizontal design along the branches. And so you get blooms upon blooms upon blooms. And so when you look at this bush, it's amazing how many blooms are actually blooming at one time. Fragrant, very nice. Some people, there's some varieties that people tell me stink, actually. There's other varieties of the double file that actually smell good. It just depends on which cultivar it is. They bloom in May. They do get fairly large. The ones at the university here at Southeast Missouri State are probably 15, 20 feet tall, but they are massive, and they put on a show when they bloom. They do have red berries on some selections. Some of the newer cultivars are sterile, but the ones that are not, they will have the red berries. And one that does is the Mauritii, and that happens to be probably one of the favorites of the gardeners in my area. So definitely take some time, do some research, and find out which ones that you want to plant in your yard. Like I said, the world of viburnums is very large. And so, take a look. You might visit the local arboretums or the botanical gardens and look around for some of the different viburnums if you're interested in planting one in your yard. Okay, Jennifer, back to you.
All right, thank you, Donna. And we're going to end with kind of an important topic. People are loving their plants to death, meaning they are giving them too much water or excessive fertility. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie to address this issue.
So we answer a lot of questions around the state regarding soil test results. And we've been chatting amongst ourselves, and we've seen a tremendous amount of garden soil test results that have high, very high, or excessive levels of phosphorus and potassium. And we suspect part of what is happening is related to people being at home or first-time gardeners due to COVID. But the reality is it's not a little is good and more is better. When we get those really high levels, those limit other available elements to the plants, and the plants don't grow well. And I think in part, I also have heard numerous times when I have asked people, well, the plants weren't growing well, so I added more fertilizer. And that is not helpful either. It is thinking about what you're doing that soil test first, so you are applying the right amount of fertilizer that we need. And that right amount encourages the best plant growth. It also saves money because fertilizer is very expensive right now. And it helps protect our environment as far as excess nutrient runoff, all of those things that we really don't want to have. So thinking about what you are doing, and also don't forget that wood ashes increase phosphorus and potassium levels in the garden. So we don't recommend using a whole lot of those. Miracle-Gro is fertilizer. Composts have fertilizer content in them, or from that organic matter in those compost or manures. All of those can increase those levels. So just really, we so encourage you to do a soil test and do that, because the reality is when you get those high levels, we cannot do anything about it to lower them. There's no magic cure. There's no silver bullet. You have to actually continue to grow plants, even though they may not be growing well, and harvest plants in order to help remove those nutrients in the soil. So that's my quick pitch to pay attention and don't love your plants to death.
All right. Thank you, Katie. So that wraps it up today, and I'm going to turn it back over to our host, Donna.
Okay, so that's all we have for you today. Remember, a recording of this week's Garden Hour can be found on the MUIPM website. Let me get to that page. Okay. It will also be live streamed there. So if you don't want to get onto Zoom, you can always watch it from that site also. Check back also to view some of the video snippets. There's some great ones on there, from planting tomatoes to bagworms to all sorts of different topics. So definitely take some time and browse that website and take a look at some of the different videos, just to give a refresher for the gardening season. Remember that if you wish to ask a question, you need to go back to the website and where you register for the Garden Hour and ask your question there. And there's also a way to submit a photo now. So definitely take a look at that, because as we progress in the gardening year, definitely everybody always has questions and they want to get answers to. So thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you will have a good week, and hopefully we can all get out in the gardens and get things planted. Join us for our next Garden Hour on May 4th at noon, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Can we wait just a minute before closing?